because this follows on nicely from that those recommendations, and I'll hand over to Mr. Adey to take us through this report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, this paper is just an update or a detailed report of the situation with regard to grazing at the moment. Two areas that I will focus on. The Karamu, we are working through the issues of grazing with each individual landowner because the situation varies so much throughout the stream. But we will be, and we are, ensuring that cattle are prevented from getting access to the river or to the Karamu stream as soon as possible. So that's through temporary fencing or whatever, but we will be working through that. In terms of the Ngārororo, it is proposed to put the fencing in on what we've called Priority 1 area set out there. That is an area where cattle currently have access to the stream when obviously, or the river when they are in that location. That work will be done as soon as conditions allow. At the moment, it's too wet to be able to get in there and do the fencing. The second and third priority areas are quite steep banks at the moment. We don't believe that cattle do access the river from there just because of the steepness of the banks. However, we will continue to monitor that, even though we're proposing to put them out while the actual fencing work out 2 to 3 years. The reason for doing that is that there is quite a lot of silt extraction going on there. We need to lower those berms to improve the capacity of the floodway. And as we do that, we will be following up with fencing once the berms have been lowered. So that's the reason for that. Certainly we will continue to monitor it. If we find that cattle are gaining access into the river, then we can change that priority or bring that forward. But the numbers aren't huge in terms of the total Hiratonga Plains Rivers scheme, but they are, they're a significant amount of money, and if we have to bring them forward, we will be just looking at what drops off in the meantime. But I'll leave it at that for now, and happy to answer questions.
Thank you. Councillor Douglas.
Mr. Chairman, at the risk of offending Councillor Curtin's eyesight again, I did have some amendments that I wanted to add to the motion, but which are digital. But I just wondered if we ought to run them off. But 2 points, two questions. In the information on Plan Change 6, it indicates that grazing is held to a certain number of days in a certain period in the year. Are we planning to bring in a similar regime progressively elsewhere? I'm thinking more of bits that are close to water rather than distant from the watercourse.
Not sure what you're referring to exactly. I think there is a little bit of confusion about what is a riparian strip, and that's why I have included it in there. Certainly from our interpretation is that it's a strip sort of 20 to, well, maybe 20 metres wide along the edge of the river. Now that doesn't preclude the grazing of the berm land sort of outside the active channel, but obviously on the river side of the stop banks. Now, if that's the area we're talking about, that is a very different issue than what we've raised in here.
No, I'm talking about the riparian strips. Are we planning to move to the same regime as Plan Change 6 for the riparian strips?
Absolutely, yes.
Chairman, yes. I'm giving notice of either a motion or an amendment up on that board.
Can everyone read that?
If the council would indulge me, I can help the council by explaining. because what I've done is I've picked up what Mr. Adey has said, I think, in the report, except for 4, which is what my question was about. The problem I've got is if we just pass 1, which is the recommendation, all the other things are not noted. They're sitting in the report, but they're not noted in the minutes. And I figured this is important enough to note them in the minutes. And I think that 2 and 3 are exactly what Mr. Adey's got in his report, and if I've inappropriately done that, I'm happy to be corrected. And then 4 picks up this regime I'm talking about, which he's agreed is what he's trying to move to on the riparian strips.
So what's the difference between having it noted in the report and noted in minutes? Just if you will indulge me, because we could see meetings heading into a whole new territory if we keep doing this.
No, I've only done it once.
Twice this meeting.
No, the other one was a different one. But I think this is important enough for it to be politically noted that we have done something. Otherwise, you're simply saying, we note the report. We've not noted anything in the report. We've just said there is a report. We've noted it. We've got a report. It doesn't actually say we agree. See what I mean? So, and then here we're saying we note that these are moving down this line. I could go through in detail of what I've got it here, the tank minutes of the last meeting, where stock exclusion came up regularly as an issue. And I've got a sense that sometimes the political apparatus is divorced from what the officers are doing, and I'm not saying that's a wrong thing necessarily, but I actually think this is one way of bridging it, is actually to say, these are the things we've heard him say, and these are the things we expect to see happen. And it's a nice little point to come to. The council, if it doesn't want to do that, can vote it down. Oh, I may not get a second, of course.
Well, let's get through some further questions first. Councillor Scott.
I just want to come to Area 1 because I'm not sure where this fits in with the priorities, but the gating of that area at times of flood, when stock are moved into the area, where would that gate be? And flood can mean just over the berm to right up to the stock bank.
Yep.
What will the access be maintained to the pathway throughout that period? Because I suspect the gate might be, the pathway may fall within the boundaries of the gate.
Yes, it will there. The gate will be at this stage, the thinking is that it will be a forestry type gate at the cattle stop. I think most people access that pathway either from Hohepa end or the Pakowai Country Park end. I don't anticipate any major issues associated with that. In terms of when would that happen, it would happen when the berms downstream are flooded, and that, they tend to get flooded first prior to, and then it moves upstream. So the cattle could be in there when the berms downstream are flooded, which means that the river is largely contained within its what I call active channel, which means bank to bank, without coming too much out onto the berms. Clearly, as the flood size increases, those berms get covered and the cattle have to find refuge. We have access to a portion of what we sort of broadly call Pakowai Country Park, which is fenced off and can have cattle there. They need a refuge outside the stock banks. Does that answer the question?
Yeah. Where does this fit in the priorities? This to me is something that reads it's going to be done.
This can be done, and it's a relatively small cost.
Councillor,
so it will be done as part of priority 1. Yes, okay.
Councillor Curtin.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just in regard to preparation of the paper, Mr. Adey, can you say that in any area where we currently graze cattle, the regional council contracts for grazing cattle are in breach of any part of Plan Change 6?
No, because Plan Change 6 sets a time limit which is beyond, for this to occur, which is beyond what the program is setting out.
So it'd be incorrect to say that the council is operating in anticipation of Plan Change 6 is operating outside of the spirit, intent and wording of Plan Change 6.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sorry, absolutely what?
Absolutely, I agree with you. We are currently, there is no Plan Change 6 refers to the Tuki. We have very little grazing on the lower Tuki and very little on the upper Tuki. They're all fenced off from the river now. So,
just assuming that, let your imagination run wild, and we have Plan Change 6
covering the region.
Applicable, covering the region.
Yes, we would still have stock away from the river by the dates set out in Plan Change 6.
Thank you. Councillor McGregor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Adey, I'm a bit confused about what's covered by under point 7 on the first page. Firstly, you say that where stock could have access, could indicates a degree of discretion. Is that discretion on the part of the council or the stock? And the second point is that you then indicate areas where they do have access as the Upper Tuki, Hirotonga Plain Scheme, rivers, and the Karamu. Now, I assume that the points after that, from 8 down to proposal, relate to what's under 7, but you haven't said anything about the Karamu. So there's 2 points there. Is what do you mean by could have access, and could you explain the Karamu situation a bit more?
Yes, certainly. Section 7, council owns land, large strips of land on the Upper Tuki, the Karamu and the Hirotonga Plains scheme, and parts of those are grazed. That's what that's referring to. Point 8 deals with the Upper Tuki, 9 to 15 deals with the Hirotonga Plains, 16 to 31 deals with the Karamu.
Okay, well, and what is the situation? Karamu is totally different character, isn't it, from the gravel rivers?
That's why it's set out separately in 16 to 31.
Thank you. Councillor Gilbertson.
Many years ago we went on a bus trip and we looked at this problem, and one of the suggestions to staff was that the problem could be solved or partially solved by growing lucerne or a crop on the flats rather than grazing cattle, and the staff agreed to look at that. Did anything ever come of that proposal?
We've certainly looked at it. There are challenges with that in terms of cultivating berm land, because that, one, there's the risk associated with that, and two, we're not, what would I say, cultivating the berm land is actually not the best option for us. The best option is to have a short grass throughout the berms so that it doesn't collect silt. Now
so you didn't look at making hay or anything. So that option's been ruled out. Any option except cattle's been ruled out. Is that correct?
Well, not entirely ruled out, but the preferable option is that cattle continue to graze to keep the grass sward low.
Was there any financial work done on that? Whether there was an option to make more money out of making hay or lucerne than cattle?
No, not that I recall.
So would it be fair to say that option hasn't been significantly canvassed?
No, not while we're able to. Well, that's fair to say. While grazing is able to be continued on the berm land, that is the best option in our term. Yeah.
Councillor Douglas.
Chairman, can I just follow up Councillor Curtin's question, because I was unclear about the answer. If Plan Change 6 applied to the whole of the Hawke's Bay, hypothetically,
yes,
by 2015 or whatever the Plan Change 6 might come in, are we also saying that the riparian strips, and I'm using the word absolutely according to your definition, we would only graze them up to 7 days a year and only graze them between whatever dates? I can't remember the dates.
We're probably saying, we would need to just look at how we manage riparian strips, which I'm talking there about a sort of 10, 20 metre strip, a lot of them will not be grazed. It may be a best option to provide some grazing in there, but at this stage, the intent would be not to graze them.
Not to graze them at all.
Yeah. But I mean, we will need to work through the details on just how best to manage those. Yeah.
Further questions? Councillor Douglas.
I would move 1, 2 and 3, given that I've had that answer. 4 can become non-utile. If there's a second, I'd speak to it.
Happy to second, Councillor Remerswell.
Mr Chairman, I'm quite reassured by this report and some of the comments. I think this will get us to a much better point than where we are now. I think there are some other issues that probably we haven't come across yet. They'll be revealed, and Mr Adey should feel keen to bring them back. But what that's trying to say is basically the report be noted, and as you have quietly chided me, Mr Chairman, it details a little bit more, but I think correctly so, because this is still a big issue, more bigger than perhaps what is considered, certainly in my part of the world. And it's just outlining what the report basically said. We're going to get out of the Ngārauru in terms of those conflicts by 2015 within existing budgets. It's all laid out here. I think that's excellent. It might require more maintenance. That was a warning, so we need to look at that in due course. The Karamu, which is a degraded river, according to the tank analysis, it was actually made public this week, and there'll be some management issues around there that will have to be carefully thought through on a staged basis and a case-by-case basis, and I think that's sensible. And then the comments that Mr Adey's made, or the reassurance that hypothetically, if we had Plan Change 6, we might even be in some of these areas out of the area, and already there is some spraying goes on for gorse and blackberry and whatever that might reveal its heads. Hello, we've moved. Oh, I see, you've just deleted it. Well done. And I think this states a very clear principle. And if you remember the debate at the beginning, I said this is a principle more or as much as an action. And the principle is that we'll do the same thing as we're expecting others to do. And I think this is a first-class sort of outcome, and I appreciate the staff response.
Councillor Remerswell.
Thank you, Mr Chair. It's good to see some movement on this issue, and which is obviously dear to my heart and also dear to the heart of many of our constituents and the public. And it's absolutely right that we've got to practice what we preach. And really look after our waterways, exclude the stock so that there's not that extra pollution going on there. It's sort of a no-brainer. So it's very satisfying to come to this point of actually be able to progress this. And I think there'll be a lot of very happy people. And from the third aspect of tourism, we get a lot of tourists around here, and people really hate to see particularly cattle in rivers doing what they do. So this is a great move forward. I'm very happy to support it.
Yeah, other speakers. Councillor Scott.
Mr Chairman, I'm sure this is dear to the hearts of a lot of people, especially the horse riders, who actually are going to be included in this. So I expect to see no more horses in the river and doing what they also do. And I think amongst some of our public, dear to the heart of, that's going to be a little bit of a shock. But we've got to be consistent in the message that we give, and it's got to be any animals who do what they do that we don't like the thought of polluting our river. So, and also got to recognise charging your horse down the bank into the river is a great way of breaking down that bank out the river too. So. It might be quite a surprise to some people.
Other speakers? I saw a hand go up somewhere.
She's just discussed the point I was going to raise.
Okay, well there you go. Two for the price of one. Councillor Curtin.
Well, Mr Chair, the thing that emerges out of this, and I'm pleased we haven't gone to the notice of motion itself and not proposing that, because what we're doing here is confirming the status quo. The council had a plan, has a plan, was working on the plan around its stop bank management, and it's just not the riparian strip, which is only a fraction of the entire system we're talking about. So what we've got here is confirmation and a report back from staff which confirms the direction of travel, confirms the activity and the work being done. So I'm very pleased that it's had that effect, and we've had the opportunity for councillors to come up to speed with what actually is going on. This is something that vexed councillors, has vexed councillors from about 2001 or earlier probably. It's one of those topics which is on the radar then. Pleased to see it continues to be on the radar. There's just this reality that stock grazing in certain parts of the stock bank system is simply the best way of managing the asset holding of the regional council. It's just the reality of what's out there. And if you want to go to some other form of management, then the ratepayer's going to have to pay a lot more for it. A quick calculation I'd done that was to have a total exclusion of stock would amount to something like $500,000 or more of expenditure that would be expended with actual no outcome. And the thing that occurs to me around this, Mr. Chair, is the actual outcome achieved in a total stock exclusion environment. The health of the river per se is not improved one iota. The only people that are affected are ratepayers who are out of pocket. So at least this report, Mr. Chair, and the examination of this area has brought to the top for discussion an existing current work program of the council, and I'm pleased to see it elucidated in this manner.
Other speakers, Councillor Gilbertson.
Clarification, Mr. Chairman, following on from Councillor Scott's, are horses stopped? Because if they are, that means no one's allowed to ride a horse across the Tuki or a ephemeral stream from Plan Chain Chicks onwards. Is that correct?
Oh, I can't answer that.
Well, we need to know whether horses are stock or not. Because in theory you have to
they're not people, I can confirm that.
I realise that, but Mr. Chairman, if you look at the ramifications of it, if you have to exclude stock, that means you can't ride a horse across the Tuki or any other thing after Plan 6 comes in.
Correct.
You would be to tell the Hunt Club to disband after 1917 because they're not allowed to ride a horse across the...
You can take it across the river in a horse float on the bridge.
No, that's important. Is our horse stock or not? Could someone answer that question?
It'll surely be debated in the process of the
EPA.
Check the definition of Plan Change 6.
Yeah, that's right. It'll be defined. It'll be defined.
Well, good. Yeah. Well, so we've placed.
So you wish to say anything else, Councillor?
That seems a bit Mickey Mouse that we've.
No, it's not Mickey Mouse.
It's very Mickey Mouse, Mr.
It's
Chairman.
Disneyland Mickey Mouse.
It's
Councillor.
weird. It's very, very strange that stock have not been defined as to whether they exclude horses or not.
Well, I think you'll find they have been.
Well, no one knows. It's pretty obvious. What is it?
Anyway, we're in debate, Councillor. You wish to speak further? Okay. Any other speakers? You wish to sum up? Order, please, Councillor. You wish to sum up, Councillor Douglas?
Mr. Chair, on the last matter, I'm sure there'll be a practical world that if a horse is travelling from A to B, that's not going to cause a difficulty. But if a horse stayed in the riparian zone for a long period and could access the water, it shouldn't be. That's really how I would take a pragmatic view, but Mr. Adey and others will have to manage that. Mr. Chairman, I'm not sure about any of the history here, although I'm told it goes back to 2001 apparently, or whatever date we said. Earlier. But I'd also acknowledge there's been submission after submission on this, so we're getting somewhere. And I think we have tidied it up. Just as a note, in the report it said the notice of motion 1.1. In fact, that isn't the notice of motion. The notice of motion is actually in the minute earlier on page 51. That is the notice of motion. Notice of motion was the amended one, and that becomes the notice. So the other one doesn't exist, and as far as the world is concerned, it doesn't. It has never had. But I think this will be helpful to get it going, and if Mr. Adey or others or staff have any issues they need to bring back, they can bring back, and if it's the Hunt Club's concern, then let's just manage it as the issue comes up. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I'll put that motion then. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary, no. Carried. Thank you. Right, let's